Yesterday was President Donald Trump's first address to a joint session of Congress, not called traditionally a State of the Union when it is a new president giving such an address just 5 or 6 weeks after being inaugurated, but effectively that sort of speech. I'm going to go through this in 3 parts. I'll give you my general impressions. We'll talk about Donald Trump's policy ideas, and then I will talk to you about the accomplishments that Donald Trump attempted to take credit for during this speech. Number one, Trump opening about Black history, civil rights, anti-Semitism. Obvious pandering in response to the criticisms that he's been on the receiving end of for the last several weeks, months, and years, but pretty smart, I would say, to get it on the record for the future. Also very noticeable, when Donald Trump decided that he was giving an applause line, you'd better clap because he was damn well not continuing until people applauded. Definitive applause lines, very clear during this speech. Weird reading, obviously. Trump is not the best person at reading. It's not tremendous. He's not bigly talented at reading. That we figured out. And he sort of couched the entire thing with this totally farcical setup about the bad situation that Trump inherited from Obama. And that was mostly riddled with lies. For example, Trump saying he inherited one of the worst financial recoveries in history or something like that. We have essentially full unemployment. We've got a stock market that more than doubled under President Obama. We have issues in the economy, of course, but just absolutely misleading to say that it's just a terrible economy that Trump inherited. Quite the opposite. Trump talking about 93 million not in the labor force. We've talked about that already. Trump also talking about how many manufacturing jobs we lost since the approval of NAFTA. He didn't mention that NAFTA was approved in 1993, meaning most of NAFTA has taken place not while President Obama was president, and manufacturing has been going away partially because of technology, and that's going to keep happening, and partially also because people like Trump have exported jobs, including to Mexico and China. How many Republicans did you get the impression, Pat? I mean, we're just guessing, but a lot of those Republicans that were clapping, deep down, at least some of them have to think that this is just absolutely and utterly insane, and they're just going to go along with it as long as Trump's approval rating doesn't dip into the 20s. They're going to bail once it gets bad, aren't they?
Yeah, I could see that happening. It's always funny to see half the room applauding and the other half of the room staying seated.
Yeah.
But then you have some crossover, like Joe Manchin, one of the more moderate Democrats, you
Yes.
could say, to put it lightly.
Right.
He was standing up quite a bit.
Yeah, I did see him clapping, and yes, I thought for a second, imagine Trump at 3 a.m. tweeting, "I did tremendously well. No matter what I said, at least half the room was clapping for me." He did not ultimately send that tweet, though. Lots of pandering. At one point, Trump pointed to a black social worker who was an invited guest. He wants her to get a great job. Of course, he'll be cutting funding to the types of programs that would create the jobs that that young lady could potentially ultimately have. Trump talked about how great President Eisenhower was. Of course, Eisenhower at one point had a top marginal tax rate on the richest Americans of 91%. Not exactly what Donald Trump is talking about. And then for me, the most vile moment, the most cringeworthy moment was when Trump started pandering over the loss of that Navy SEAL in Yemen at that botched raid to Karen Owens, the widow of Ryan Owens. She was there, and it was some of the worst political pandering I've seen, touting the intelligence that was obtained, which turns out we really didn't get very much good intelligence from that. Trump has already attempted to pass the blame over that, the results of that raid, to the generals. Totally horrible move. We know that Trump couldn't even be bothered to be in the Situation Room for that raid. We know that Trump casually approved that raid over dinner with some of his advisors. And we also know that this was a raid that President Obama opted not to go on because he didn't believe that the potential rewards outweighed the risks. And painful to watch, not only because of the visible agony of Karen Owens, but also because of the just cringeworthy pandering.
I mean, I think it's clear that the Yemeni raid was a failure by any measure because 30 civilians perished. We all even lost one of our own, a Navy SEAL, and we didn't even get the top al-Qaeda operative that we were trying to get. So for Trump not even to be in the Situation Room when this unfolded, and then for him to try to pass the blame onto his generals and use these people who are the family members of victims as props, I mean, it was really just an example of pandering. And really unfortunate if you think about it.
It makes absolutely no sense. It's vile. It was crassly manipulative, crassly manipulative. Okay, those are my general thoughts. Let's get into some of Trump's ideas, policy ideas, and the context of what he's talking about. Just a lot of alternative facts, which I like to call lies or distortions. Trump talking about the middle class has been shrinking as we've exported jobs. Trump's one of those job exporters. Absolutely no position to make that claim. Trump talking about the infrastructure spending that he's going to do. Okay, I actually agree with infrastructure spending, not in the crony capitalist way that Trump will do it, but since when do Republicans like the idea of spending $1 trillion on infrastructure? How are Republicans cheering now for that when they opposed President Obama wanting to do it and saying it was a disaster? In the midst of a disastrous recession when Obama took over, Republicans were voting no on infrastructure spending, which now they claim will be good for the economy. It's totally incoherent. Trump saying the drug epidemic will stop. Well, not with the war on drugs that Attorney General Jeff Sessions wants to revive. Constructing a wall, another policy idea from Trump, just stupid, right? I mean, it'll take longer to build than Donald Trump's first term. It'll cost over $20 billion. Many undocumented immigrants not actually crossing at the border. Trump claiming that most attackers since 9/11 came from outside the U.S. If you're talking about terrorism committed in the U.S., that's flatly untrue. I don't know what semantic game his speechwriters thought he could write there to make that even remotely true. Trump talking about new vetting procedures for immigrants and refugees. Previously, those vetting procedures that were described by the Trump administration were identical to what was being done under President Obama. So again, not really an idea. Trump's plan to demolish and destroy ISIS. I looked at that plan yesterday. It's the plan developed and started to be executed under President Obama, full stop, just not a Trump idea. Trump saying that companies are taxed at one of the highest rates in the world, so Trump wants to lower the tax rate. The tax rate on paper is irrelevant. The question is, what is the effective tax rate? And as we know, many huge corporations have major profits, but they pay a zero effective tax rate because of deductions and loopholes. Again, not really an idea, or I guess a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. He got to Obamacare, repeal and replace Obamacare. So what's going on with that? Obamacare provisions increasingly popular with Americans. Trump saying, well, the solution is to lower the cost so more people can afford it. But he doesn't want an individual mandate. How do you lower the cost if you don't cover everybody, which is what gets people in the emergency room for primary care, which makes insurance for people who do have it more expensive? Just incoherent.
Yeah, and we were promised to hear him unfold his plan for repealing and replacing Obamacare.
Yeah.
He spent half of that section just talking about how Obamacare is bad. We get that that's your point.
Yes.
Move on from that, get to the solutions that you have.
Yes.
And it was just typical Republican talking points, healthcare savings accounts.
Choice.
And crossing state lines, be able to purchase healthcare across state lines.
Yep.
It's more of the same.
It's more of the same, no real plan. And again, just the solution is lowering the cost. Wow. How insightful. He wants to support men and women of law enforcement. It sounds nice. It's not a policy proposal. It's just pandering. And then he touted the biggest defense spending increase in American history. It sounds patriotic. It sounds like it's going to be great for safety, national security. We spend an insane amount already on defense. We have 50 bases in Germany alone. There's absolutely no reason to increase defense spending, period. And then at the end, this had been sort of controversial because Trump had made some less than positive comments about NATO. Trump making it clear that he supports NATO. It's not clear he knows what it is, not clear he knows what it means to support NATO, but he supports NATO. And okay, that was one moment when Democrats clapped. Accomplishments that Trump tried to take credit for during his first address to a joint session of Congress. This is the best, okay? First, Trump touted all of those companies that announced that they're going to, quote, invest billions in the U.S., including Carrier and Ford. Most are bogus and not policy. Many of those decisions predate Trump being elected. Many of those decisions were not because of a great economic environment. It was because Trump called up companies and said, take money. Take money is not an economic policy. And a lot of those decisions also are going to lead to fewer jobs. The Carrier decision, for example, Carrier will be taking the money Trump's giving them and using it to automate their factory, which will over the long term destroy jobs. Trump taking credit for the stock market gains that have taken place since November 8th. Those are under President Obama, absolutely and totally bogus. Trump touting his hiring freeze on federal workers which is insane. It costs money. It might sound good to Trumpists, but when you do a hiring freeze, you either pay overtime to the employees you have, which overtime is much more expensive than just hiring someone and having them work under 40 hours a week, or you bring in contractors, as I drop my Sharpie because I'm so agitated by this, you bring in contractors who charge more per hour than W-2 employees. Trump taking credit for draining the swamp, laughable. I mean, just completely untrue. Has anyone filled the swamp more than Trump, with everything from establishment consultants to Wall Street bankers that he slammed Hillary Clinton for being associated with? And for each new regulation, Trump wants to eliminate two. That's just idiocy. That a haphazard recommendation like that is not really policy. It's idiocy. So taking credit for a lot of things that I'd be pretending I didn't do, and taking credit for lots of things that have nothing to do with him.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people are going to chalk this up as a success because he at least gave the appearance of someone who is presidential.
Yeah, well.
And he stuck to the teleprompter at least 99%. I mean, he would do some ad-libbing here and there. But honestly, you have to kind of think of it as one of his more finer moments when it comes to...
The bar was so low.
I mean, just people tuning in who may not watch these things unfold every day. If someone saw him be inaugurated and then wait a month to see him again, they would think that he's had so many successes thus far.
How much growth we've seen in Little Donald over the last 5 weeks. Trump said he's going to stop regulations that threaten coal miners. More jobs are being created in solar energy than coal energy. Coal is a joke. It's a dying industry. The world is laughing at us, and Trump is cheering that he's going to revitalize coal. He bragged about signing those meaningless orders saying he wants the Dakota Access Pipeline and Keystone XL to proceed. That is a recommendation. It's also not an accomplishment, and it's also embarrassing. The world is laughing at us about Trump wanting to build those pipelines. Also saying, and this was just funny, that the pipelines must be made with American steel. Number one, the steel that would be used for those pipelines has already been purchased, so Trump saying that now wouldn't change anything. But the real hypocrisy is Trump has built many of his own buildings with foreign steel. I mean, just a ludicrous hypocrite. Bragging that he got the U.S. out of TPP. Absolutely ridiculous. TPP was dead as far as U.S. involvement months before Trump was inaugurated. Had nothing to do with Trump whatsoever. Also, Trump wants to coordinate strategy to dismantle drug cartels. How about legalizing marijuana, which has been shown by a number of reports, it's been predicted would actually hurt cartels more than any of the nonsense that Trump is proposing. And then, of course, Trump bragging that he kept his promise and appointed a justice to the Supreme Court from the 20 justices that a right-wing think tank gave him. Not exactly something I'd be bragging about, but, you know, Trump did.
You have to fill up the hours somehow.
Yeah, exactly. So optics, you think we're positive here?
Absolutely, yes.
Substance?
No, it's never good with substance when it comes to Donald Trump.
I agree with you. Substance was absolutely insane. If you came in with embarrassingly low expectations that most people would have about this man, then maybe on optics, he conveyed some degree of strength. Pretty bad. Send me your thoughts. I'm on Twitter at @DPakman. The show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show.